Hi everyone, Paul Levy with Brownells here, and today we're talking 1911 tools with Steve Ostrom.
Good morning, nice to be here. Been looking forward to this one ever since we did the original 1911.
Yeah, so if you caught that, what, a month now maybe?
A month and a half.
A while back we talked 1911s, how to go about constructing your own, basically how to go about doing it. And to complement that video, we're going to talk 1911 tools today. Real broad overview. You can see here we got a whole bunch of tools out, so if you have specific questions on a 1911 tool you have, or curious about buying what you need to build your 1911, shoot it our way. We'll be happy to answer all the questions we can. It's going to be mainly a broad overview of tools. We're happy to get into details if you have questions, but if you want to get into specifics on how to use a specific tool or a certain operation, check out our YouTube page. We have a section dedicated to just 1911, gunsmithing, different tools, different functions. So check that out. It's a great resource. So today, Steve, I guess we'll start with when you're building a 1911, where you like to start out and what tools you need for those initial operations.
Well, I'll show you the most important tool on the bench right now, and that is a book. Any kind of book. It doesn't have to be this particular one, but something that gives you a roadmap how to build one of these, because they are not intuitive. The Kuhnhausen manual is excellent. It's got dimension drawings, it's got instructions. It even talks about using a lot of these tools and how to do them. So small investment for a whole lot of knowledge gained over decades.
Now there's two volumes, right?
There's two volumes. This basic volume 1 is all you need to put together a good 1911. When you want to start doing more bells and whistles, volume 2 is right there with you.
Okay. So you got the book. Where do I go from there for tool-wise? If I've got, say I'm starting with a slide frame barrel I bought from Brownells. I've got say a Caspian frame and slide, cart barrel, something like that. Where do I go?
Okay, well all those components will not go together when you get them because they're all oversized. So you need a good measuring instrument. A dial caliber that's reliable will work very well. You need a marker of some kind. I use a Sharpie, but anything will work. Small file. I use a pillar file because it's smooth on the sides, cuts on the face. You can control where you're removing material. And you'll always need a hammer. If you're gunsmithing, got to have a hammer. Soft face and a hard face.
And pretty much all the tools we're going to be talking about today, it's not like you need a end mill or anything like that. You can do these at home for the most part.
Yeah, these are all hand tools with just, I think one exception, we have that slide holder that's meant to be used in a milling machine. Holds it at different angles, you know, if you're putting serrations or whatever in there.
Yeah, and the true master smiths in the 1911 world, they use a lot of machines that are very precise. But for the at-home guy, the amateur, who, there were a lot of well-known gunsmiths did a lot by hand too.
Exactly. Okay. But when you start out, say you're starting your build, you're going to fit your frame to your slide, and normally with new components like the Caspian components or the STIs or whatever, most of the material is going to come off your frame, off these rails here. But you need to measure them. You need to measure the thickness of them and the side to side, and then you need to compare that to the slide dimensions, the mating dimensions here. You'll find that it's going to be a little wide, and you'll have to take some off each side here. And it's going to be a little high. You're going to have to take some off the top a lot of times. Not unusual at all. This is a new tool we just picked up here for doing the rails. And what it does, it allows you to stone the rails in a controlled manner where you don't get into the slide here, or into the frame body and mark it up. It allows you to stone and just take off that thousandth or two that you need.
And what tool is that, Steve?
It's the Everglades Ammo is who gives that to us. And basically it's a stone with a fence on it. And you just rub it against the frame without hurting anything, and this stone takes off just that little strip there where you need it.
Just barely.
And you can turn it over and do the top as well.
Okay.
And the thing is, when you're fitting a frame to a slide, you're only taking off a thousandth or two here, a thousandth or two here, and then the same on the other side. It doesn't amount to much. So if you can control it like with a tool with this, you got it made. However, I've fit these with files and stones before. No problem. I fit them on the milling machine. It's just a matter of removing the material in a controlled manner, and a lot of measuring goes into that.
So not the operation for your Dremel?
Nope, no Dremel tools allowed there.
All right. And just to remind everyone, we are taking questions right now, so send them our way in the comments below. if you have any questions about 1911 tools, say you're halfway through a build, need to figure out how to do something, send the question our way. We'll be happy to address it on the air. If we don't get to it for whatever reason, we'll be happy to respond in the comments to take care of you there. So as we go here, feel free to shoot us your questions regarding 1911 tools and how to build a 1911.
Yep.
Okay, so that's on the frame side anyways. Where do we go from there
Well,
tool-wise?
once we get the frame and slide working together, we can fit the barrel.
Okay.
And barrel fitting can be a little involved, depends on which barrel you pick. You can get a drop-in or you can get an oversized like this one. This is a cart easy fit barrel, and it is noteworthy in that it has these two little nubs right here in the locking lug recess. And what that does is it allows you to leave this part down here alone. Normally you would fit this to the slide stop where I'm working here, but this allows you to raise it up into the barrel, or into the slide rather, into the lock position a little at a time until it'll just slide over your slide stop. So it takes a kind of a complicated job and makes it much easier. That's why they call it the easy fit barrel. And we have a little kit down here that CART sells also with the proper gauges, alignment tools, and a file.
In there.
And it's a really slick outfit. You can get a match. It's got a tri-bushing too, which is loose, nice and loose. You don't need a tight bushing to fit this barrel. But the great thing is you can get as tight a lockup as any professional builder with one of these little CART easy fit barrels.
So for a first-time builder, that's probably a good way to go then.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is, as long as you're patient, because these little nubs don't have a lot of metal on them, and you don't have to remove a lot. So all you have to do is measure, be careful, follow the instructions, and you can get it as tight as you want. It's a great, great little tool.
Okay, and then this question comes up a lot. So we have some stuff labeled drop-in on the website. Is there anything truly drop-in on a 1911?
Yeah.
What's that mean for a 1911?
A lot of the barrels that say drop-in are drop-in 95 to 98% of the time.
Okay.
But a lot of times if you have a tight, extra tight slide or something, you'll need to remove a little bit right here. That's going to rub on your breech face, the barrel hood here. And we're talking 1,000th or two at the most. What they do when they make a drop-in barrel, like say you get one from Wilson or Ed Brown, they make it at the very top of the tolerance. So if the blueprint says +2, -1, they're going to do the +2. They're going to take it all the way up to the top so you get the maximum accuracy out of it you can. It's going to have the least amount of slop in it.
And the goal when you're fitting all these, if you're doing it by hand, is to get it, usually you want it as tight as possible. If somebody does, to operate and have everything lock up nice and smooth. As far there's not as much rattle, say on a stock.
If you're going to all the trouble fitting a slide to a frame and then getting an oversized barrel, or even a tight drop-in, you do want
that's
a tight.
the end state.
Yeah, it's
okay, so
highly desirable.
On the barrel, we discussed the cart, and then your more traditional barrel. Is there anything else on the barrel that needs to be fitted? Or say you went the other route. Say you didn't get a cart easy fit. What goes on there?
Well, this is my favorite tool here, the barrel fitting tool. And what this does is this cutter takes the place of your slide stop. So you put that in your frame like that, put the bushing on the other side. And when you put your barrel and slide on, you force the barrel forward and you run this cutter, and it cuts it so beautifully. That undersurface on your barrel feet does a great job. It takes you within 1,000th of where you want to be. So by the time you take some sandpaper and smooth out your mill marks, you're there. The gun will close and go into battery. Really slick tool. It's probably not for everybody. It's a little costly for just one job. If you and a friend both want to build a 1911, it'd be worth the investment if you split it, or if you build more than one a year. It'd be well worth the money because it saves you so much trouble. It's got two cutters. It's got an alignment jig here that holds your barrel in the proper position. And this is a leverage tool. That allows you to push the slide forward with leverage against that cutter as you're cranking.
So you don't quite need 3 hands for that?
Nope, you just need a vise. You definitely do need a vise for that job though.
Okay.
And for a lot of these jobs.
And I think we're going to jump ahead here. We got a viewer question. I think as those come in, we'll skip ahead if we need to. Andy asks about fitting a beaver tail to a standard Remington R1 or other 1911. What do I need?
Right. Say you want to put a Wilson Combat on there. I've got a Wilson Combat jig right here. These are hardened steel fixtures that go on each side of the frame, and I'll go ahead and install it on one real quick.
And maybe for a viewer that doesn't know what we're talking about when we say beaver tail and what we're talking about here.
Yeah, let me get this in place. Oh, I got it turned around the wrong way. There we go. I've got a beaver tail right here.
So most stock 1911s, they don't have the rear portion up there to protect you potentially from hammer bite.
Right.
And this is a very common upgrade on a 1911, but you have to do some fitting here.
Yeah, see now, if
install it.
you look at this one's been done already. That puts the Wilson contour on it. I've got a simpler one here from Ed Brown that puts his contour on it. This is a 250 thousandths radius.
So is there a standard diameter for that, or is it vary depending on the manufacturer of the
250 is the standard, but Springfield Armory has less metal back here, so we go with a 220 for it, so you don't wind up with any gaps.
Sure.
But if you follow this around with your file won't cut these, by the way. Follow that all the way around with your file and take your time, because it does take a while. It takes me about a half hour to do this. Once you're done, you smooth it off, put your beaver tail on, try it with your safety through it. It may be still too tight. That's where your Sharpie comes in. You put the Sharpie on there, find out where it's rubbing, take it back down with a file, stone, whatever. And you can do a real professional job at home, and all you need is a file, a stone, and this little jig.
And about how much do those little jigs run?
I think they're like 20 bucks, something like that.
So that's a pretty, not counting the beaver tail, that's a pretty inexpensive thing to go about doing.
It's something you don't want to try freehanding.
Oh, yeah,
it would look, well, I've seen it done. It's pretty awful.
So you don't recommend that, all right.
No.
Here's a question when it comes to fitting in general. Does a looser 1911 run more reliably or no? How does that play into it?
Yeah, all things considered it will. However, a well-built tight gun will run just as reliably too if the guy that built it knew what he was doing. But for general purposes, if you got a factory and you're putting out 1911s, looser the better. If you're a military, you don't want those guns super tight, looser the better. If it's just a range gun, it's not a big deal. But if you're out in the mud trying to defend yourself, then it's nice to have a loose gun.
Okay. So that so we went about barrel fitting with the cutting tool. Where do we go from there? Is that the only tool needed for the barrel if you go that route? Or?
You just need something to about this basic diameter, about 200 thousandths, to wrap some sandpaper around and polish those feet after you've done the cutting. And then, because you've already done the hood, you do the hood to length, then you do the feet.
Okay.
So after that, it's just a matter of playing with the barrel. Sometimes I'll take a stone and go over these ridges here so they go into lockup a lot easier. Sometimes it can be have a little burr on them or something. So you just make them shiny on the end. That's all you do. You don't really bevel them.
Take that hard edge off the locking lugs. Okay.
That's the difference between a custom gun and a production gun. Those little touches like that.
They come right off the machine and they throw them in a production gun. Whereas when you hand fit it, you're taking all those little touches.
Yeah. There are some companies that do a better job than others. I mean, they actually have people fitting them, but for the most part, a lot of them out there are just plugged together.
So we got the barrel and we got the slide frame fitted together. Where do we go from there?
Well, you can take all the parts off and start fitting your trigger. And a lot of people don't realize it, but a 1911 trigger is a fitted part. So I've got one here. This is a nylon, ultra lightweight, but when you try to put this in your frame, it's going to slide in and stop. It needs material taken off the top and off the bottom to go inside the trigger guard. That's to eliminate up and down play. We figure if you're paying good money for an aftermarket trigger, you don't want it sloppy. So all the builders leave extra material there for you to take down and fit it to your particular frame. They're not all the same dimension top to bottom. That being said, before you even try to fit the trigger, you might want to go into your frame with either a file or a special stone and go through the trigger track. Take your pillar file or a small stone and get in there and remove any burrs, because a lot of these triggers have aluminum shoes, like this one right here, and your frame will scratch the dickens out of them if you haven't deburred it.
Are there specific files for the interior there to get that exactly?
We have a stone actually for that, a trigger track stone we call it. But for the face here, where it actually the broach stops, I just use a pillar file for that.
Okay.
Works perfectly. Gets in there nice and slick. You don't hit anything you don't really want to.
Yep.
So nice
right.
and easy. So
Good to know
once you get your trigger in, you can fit your magazine catch, and most of those drop in. Magazine catch, if you know how to install one and uninstall one, most of those drop in. Once in a while, if you're dealing with a peculiar frame, or some of the premium frames I've noticed are very tight in this cutout here, you may need to stone or sand around the periphery of your mag release, and then it'll go in. Make sure it just drops in and drops out, so it'll be reliable once you lock it into place.
Okay. So again, we're live right now. If you have any questions on 1911 tools, that's the topic today. We're talking about 1911 tools, how to go about using them, and any ins and outs Steve Ostrom might have for going about doing a specific task. Got a question here. What is the reason I would build a 1911 rather than buy one?
Well, there's two reasons. One is just so you can say you built it, personal satisfaction. The other is you may want something no one else builds. You may want a 357 SIG with a 6-inch barrel or something. I don't know where you're going to find one of those unless you make it. The other thing is you don't have to build the whole gun. You can, if you've got a 9mm, say just a 5-inch government, you can build a 40 top end for it and just have a switch top gun if you want to do that. The possibilities are endless. You can plug and play as you go. It's just, unlike the AR, you can't just plug them in, you got to fit them.
Is there really, say, a cost saving? Say if I was going to go with a 1911, say at $1,500 or $2,000, that's a relatively nice gun. Is there a cost savings versus doing it yourself?
It depends on whose components you buy.
Okay.
We have some really good frames from Caspian and slides, which are not all that expensive. We have some other, Les Bear and Nighthawk, which are more expensive. They'll get you further up on that price point.
Okay.
But to be honest with you, if you're wanting to build your first gun, the easiest way to go is to buy a cheap, and I'm saying it, cheap imported 1911, $400 to $500, or a used one, and replace one part on a time on it. Just get a working gun to start with, and then try replacing the barrel in it, see if it still works when you're done. Or try doing a trigger job on it and see if it still works, or safety. That way you've got very little invested in it. You know you had the working gun before you did that part, and you keep playing with that part until your gun works again. That's why I advise a lot of our callers.
So a first-time 1911 builder, you don't recommend going out and buying the various slides, frames, barrels, and just trying to get it all
If you've got
put together.
gunsmithing experience already, it wouldn't be a problem.
Okay.
Or if you're a craftsman of some type, even a really good woodworker could, put a 1911 together with hand tools like this.
Okay. All right, so we were talking about triggers. That's pretty much fitted. The tools there, the magazine release. Where are we going next? What other tools are needed as we go?
You need to make a decision if you're going to stick with, say you bought a gun and you're modifying it, if you're going to stick with your internal components like your sear and your hammer, or if you want to put in a kit or choose your components. We've got some great kits that come with your hammer, sear, disconnector, and sear spring from, say, Cylinder and Slide and Nowlin and some others that give you a pre-made trigger job by just dropping in the parts. They're great, I've used them, and they always deliver pretty close to what they say they will, if not right on the money. If you have to rework parts, we've got ways to do that. This is a Sear Jig from Ed Brown, for example. You use it in conjunction with a stone. Put your sear in the end here. Put your shim under your stone and stone away until you get your angle correct. This has a set screw right here that tilts your sear at the exact.
I don't know if we can show what exactly you're doing there.
Let me put that in there. That's
okay.
A great idea.
And this tool is inexpensive as well.
It is.
So it's not like you have to spend hundreds of dollars on some of these tools to get going or off the ground.
Plus we have the Brownells equivalent there too. We've got a similar fixture like that. And see if I get this in here right. I got it in backwards.
And the nice thing is, if you are using these tools, and there's a lot of tools that do the same job, if you go about using a tool and it's not working for you, we have a 100% guarantee. So you can always send it back, try out a different tool. I'm not saying you go through our catalog and try everything out and send it back, but it's a great way to have that confidence that if you buy something from Brownells, you know that if it doesn't work quite right, I can get it taken care of.
Here's your setup. You just put your shim down. That shim is for spacing. And you just go over your sear like that. Nice and easy. You can do this at your kitchen table if you want to.
Okay. Pretty straightforward there.
And it's an easy buy. There's not a lot of investment there.
So we got a question here. Kyle asks, if you only have one barrel to fit, what is a good way to cut the lower lugs? Since you mentioned the cutter may be expensive if you just have one. So say you want to fit your barrel with the rear lugs and you don't have this, what do you do?
I use my marker. I mark the feet. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, you need anything?
We're good.
Okay. What I do is I use my marker. I put it together, hit it up against the slide stop, find out where it's hitting, and then I take a 3/16 chainsaw file and I start fitting the barrel. And you mark it again, put it together, try it, look at your marks, that's where you file, and you keep on working back along those barrel feet until slowly those barrel feet start to come up over your slide stop. You'll be working in this area right here. You'll be filing right in here, because those barrels will leave a little extra material there. The trick is to get it even. You got to do both sides evenly so your barrel doesn't want to cock and hit one side more than the other on the slide stop.
That's the tough part without that tool.
Right, and we have this little alignment jig which looks like this, and it's got recesses here to go inside the slide rails. And when you put that together, see if I got the right end here, yeah, it lines up the barrel dead center. So you can get an idea where your barrel's supposed to be sitting. Kind of a neat little tool. It's just a little fixture. Easy to make if you got a milling machine. Hard to make if you don't.
So you'll pop that in, take the barrel out,
Yep.
do a little bit, put it
Yep.
back in, see how, okay.
Yep,
So
exactly.
patience is key for a lot of these operations.
Right. This is most useful for getting your hood done. I forgot to mention earlier that when you're fitting the hood, it's not only for length on some of the match barrels, but it'll also be for the sides. So when you put this in the slide there, it shows which one's bumping or overhanging the recess in the top here. See, this one's been fitted, so it'll go right in there, but a match barrel won't go in there yet. So that helps you line that portion up. And you use again, you go back to your pillar file. You can do just about anything to a 1911 with this, except those barrel feet. You want a chainsaw file for that. Okay. And you can go down to the hardware store and get one of those, because I've done it.
Okay, good tip there. Roger asks, will shock buffs on the guide rod do all they are advertised to do? Also, I can't see where, but is there any fitting that may be needed to accommodate the extra space needed for the shock buff?
Normally, it's not a problem on a full-size government model. Shock buff works great, lets your slide lock back every time, no big deal. If you get to a shorter barrel like a Commander or an Officer's, it can give you trouble. In fact, in Officer's, I don't think you can get a shock buff in there. Commander, some of them work with a shock buff really well, some of them do not.
Maybe we can explain what a shock buff is.
Oh, yeah.
Not everyone may
I don't
know
have
what
one here, but it's just a little a washer type made out of synthetic material that slides over.
It's usually from Wilson Combat sells
Wilson
those,
Combat, Ed Brown sells them, and you put it back on the guide here for your recoil spring. And what it does is it gives the slide something to bottom out on. You know, this is going to come and hit right here under recoil, and it hits that shock buff instead, some kind of rubbery material. If you're going to use shock buffs, they're great. Just remember, they're disposable, like Kleenex. You've got to check them and throw them away at regular intervals, because every so many rounds they're just beat to death and they need to be swapped out. They're also great insurance. If you shoot a plus P load once in a while, if you just want to go out and qualify or try a extra power load, they'll give you a little extra protection, you know, against that metal to metal hitting. And that way you don't have to swap out your recoil spring necessarily for hotter loads. Just keep an eye on your shock buff and make sure it's not worn out, because they'll spread out and it's like putting brakes in your 1911. It slows down your slide.
Okay. This is a good question here. Is there a right or wrong way to use a file? A specific method maybe you recommend?
Oh, yeah. A typical file only cuts in one direction, so don't pull it. If you got a file that cuts on the push stroke, just do that. Otherwise you're dulling it. You're just going against the teeth, just like a saw. In fact, a file is nothing but a wide saw, really, with really fine teeth. The other thing is, file with 2 hands and put the work in a vise. Every gunsmith starting out has to learn that. You don't sit here and do this. You put it in a vise and all of a sudden you've got all this control, and you can take and do a smooth one cut, and it starts to look professional at that point. It really makes a difference if you just hold your work. So a vise, you know, after the book and maybe a hammer and a measuring tool, you really need a vise to work on this stuff.
Okay, good info there. We got a lot of good questions here. Joe asks, any chance of Brownells putting a class on at the shop? I guess it's right here at our location.
Oh, well, there's no problem. We got no shortage of instructors, that's for sure. We could sure do it. We do put on classes, summer classes for the NRA affiliated schools at the various gunsmithing schools around the country. But yeah, we're always open to doing one here. We do armorers classes here now, but something more in depth is definitely doable. And
Brownells does support quite a few armorers and gunsmithing courses throughout the country, so that may not be a Brownells specific instructor, and not Steve Ostrom, but there are a lot that are supported by Brownells across the country by various instructors. So you can always find one relatively locally. They're put on fairly frequently, but that's a good question, good idea.
We could always ask Mike Watkins, our senior 1911 guy.
Exactly.
Mike's put together hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of 1911s, and he could teach this class in his sleep.
That would be a good course. So we kind of we had a lot of good questions, and actually we'll jump back into one, but I think we were at the magazine release, the trigger.
We had some action parts in there.
Okay.
We talked about stoning. We had that one fixture out.
On the Sear, okay.
Yeah, I've also got the power custom fixture, which I'll bring that back here.
Yeah, probably a good idea.
Yeah, and show you how that works. Let's see if I can get this in here again. There. What this does, the power custom fixture, it works on a number of guns by swapping out these adapters here.
Yeah, here's one you can just buy separately.
Yeah. And what you do is you can raise and lower this with the roller bearing on it. This is what your stone rests on, and then it rests on the part. So you raise this a certain amount, and it's given in the instructions. You stone your part, put it in the gun and try it. See if you like the trigger pull. If you want to go lighter, you can increase the depth or decrease depending on the type of sear you're working on, and very gradually change that angle until you get the trigger pull you want. It's really a well thought out tool. It holds everything very rigidly, and it lets you just click, click, click your way up or down and change that angle of the stone ever so slightly. It's so much better than trying to do it by hand. There are guys that can do it by hand, but they've done hundreds and hundreds by hand, and they, you know, sooner or later they get the knack of it.
So if somebody's building quite a few guns per year, that's a good tool to pick up.
That's a good tool.
For consistency's sake.
That's a good tool. But all things said and done, the Brownells tool here and the Ed Brown tool, you can get the same quality sear work with that.
Okay, so a few different options there. Brian asks, and again, we're taking questions live, so drop a question in the comments. We're talking 1911 tools, how to use them. Really going over real broadly the amount of tools or what's needed for certain tasks. If you have specific questions on a certain detail, let us know. We'd be happy to answer it. Brian asks, Springer 9mm 1911. Slide feels sluggish when firing factory loads or my reloads. Tried different recoil spring, lighter and heavier than factory. Could timing be an issue, or barrel hood riding the locking lug on the underside of the slide? What's going on there?
Well, if you had some locking issues, you'd probably see rub marks really clearly. Take it apart and look at it under a strong light and see if you can see where it's actually, you know, burnishing that metal in a forceful way. Sometimes on a 9mm, I like to add a lesser mainspring too. I like to change out the hammer spring to like a 19 or 20 pound. That eases the uncocking effort and makes a 9 run a lot better. If you're having issues closing the gun, that could be a feeding issue too. 9s in a single stack gun don't feed as well as like a 45 or a 38 Super, something with a straight case. So that could be part of it too, I don't know. But if you suspect it's the barrel mating up with the slide, definitely just take them apart, get them under a strong light and see if there's any battering on those little edges. Right in, you know, right in here where it's hitting to try to lock up. And you'll see corresponding marks. Where did I put my slide? Did I?
Oh, right, I hit it back there.
That's all right. You'll see corresponding marks in here. They'll start to round over, and if you try going along the flat or along the upper wall, you'll feel a burr in one direction or another if it's not timed up right. It's pretty easy. Just get in there with something sharp like a scribe or something and see if you can feel a burr anywhere along the line there. And that's always a giveaway that your timing's not right. You need to look at your link, or you need to look at your height on your lockup or something.
Okay. Now you mentioned 9mm maybe not feeding as well as a 45. Is there anything or any tools related to the feed ramp or that side of the barrel?
Yeah. Actually, one of the things you can do, if your gun will allow it, is to put an extra high mag catch in it. It raises up the angle and decreases that nosedive effect. Other than that, switching magazines is a good option too. I've got a gun that only likes Wilson Combat magazines for some reason. I've got another 9 that'll run with almost any magazine. Polishing the feed ramp helps a lot. Using full metal jacket helps a lot. Once you get that stack of 9s in a full-size magazine, each one has a little bit of case taper, and it's really tough to make that first round stand up right and feed up. The McCormick magazines have that 2-piece follower like an alligator jaw that's spring-loaded, and they do very well. But like I said, for me, in my particular gun that's fussy, the Wilson Combat works, and it won't be the same across the board. You have to experiment.
Okay, so we were talking Sear tools before we went on to questions. Where do we go to next? What tools may come in handy as you go through the process?
There's quite a few little tools you don't need very often, but say this is a disconnector scraper. You don't need to scrape a disconnector recess very often. And what I mean is I'm talking about this recess right here where your disconnector rides. Once it's up there, the gun can fire because the belt slides in the right position. But if you have a rough surface in there, you can scrape it clean with this. This is a tool bit basically. And that can make your gun function a lot more smoothly. As far as tools that you really have to have, we're past the point now where we can do almost everything with a file by now. It's getting easier.
Okay, so the necessary tools we pretty much covered. Got a question about fitting a mainspring housing. Are there any tools needed to get that in there, or oddball mainspring housings maybe?
There's my tool.
Okay.
Let me grab a mainspring housing here. Pillar file, you can go up each side of these little ribs here. You don't want to mess with the frame unless it's just a problem. And you can take this down on the sides, take it down front and back till it goes in easily. If you've got an alignment issue with the hole here, then you got your choice of either enlarging this hole with a drill, which is what I normally do, or sending your frame back if it's misdrilled, or sending this back if it's misdrilled. If you got your mainspring housing from us and the hole's not in the right location, just send it back. We'll give you a new one. That's the easy fix for that.
That's a good tool.
As far as the rest of the fitting, if you want it flush on the bottom here, oh, this isn't the right frame for this one. You know, a lot of custom guns, they make a big point of, flushing this off. A regular mill file will work. This is a little narrow. I'd want a wider single cut file. Or if it's as close as this is right here, you can just sand it with a sanding block and some 320 paper and you'll get there too. But it does give it a nice look. Just be sure when you do that you have the gun assembled with the spring tension on this mainspring housing from the hammer strut. That way it's pushing down, and after you file it, you won't get a nasty surprise after you assemble it by having this stick up just a little bit more. So make sure the gun's assembled, or at least the hammer and spring are in there.
Okay. What about on this one here, this bobtail jig? Where does that come into play?
Oh boy.
And
well,
how does somebody go about using that?
That is in a drill press with a...
so that's not a hand item there.
It's not a hand item, because what it does, it allows you to relocate this hole right here up about this distance, a little over 1/4 of an inch, maybe 3/8. So what you do is you lock this in a vise, you put your frame on here. Oh, you don't need to put your frame on yet, I'm sorry. What you do is you put this in a vise, then you put your drill bit in this first hole here. That locates the new hole. So now all you have to do is slide your frame on, like I just did a minute ago, and now I can't do it. And you go to the second hole with your frame, the existing hole. You lock that in place with your mainspring pin, your mainspring retaining pin. And your drill bit will be positioned over this blank area here, but it'll be in just the right place. So you go ahead and drill. But you got to have a vise, you got to have a drill press or a milling machine to do this, because you only get one good shot at it unless you're a good welder.
So putting a bobtail mainspring housing on, that takes more machinist capability.
That's the easy part, because you're going to take off a bunch of metal off here. Yeah. However, for a carry gun, man, there's nothing like it. It just takes that whole corner right off, and you can put a government size in there. It feels more like an officer without that big old corner sticking out. So it's well worth it.
Ryan asks, could you discuss the different hammer sear pin blocks or adjustment pins for checking the sear engagement? Pros and cons, or the different options?
I just use the ones that go on the outside of the frame, personally. There's a lot of adjustable little jigs and stuff, but I just take those pins that have a little boss in the middle, put them in the holes. Well, actually, I use this side. Put them in the holes, put your hammer and sear on top there, and look. It gives you a nice, clear look of what's going on, especially with the particular spacing of your frame. You know, between those two holes, the relationship is the same. As long as those pins are a nice, snug fit, no worries there. It'll give you a true picture of what you're getting into. Still, the best picture will be to assemble the gun, mark the sear, mark the hammer ledge, and see what is rubbing where, and decide where any extra material, if any, needs to be taken off.
So you recommend going that route? That's the true way to do it?
There's a lot of assembly and disassembly in a trigger job.
Okay.
A lot of it. You might do it a dozen, 2 dozen times to get it right.
Okay. So here we got, I'm going to hop around here just on what I see. Here's a little tool here. You mind explaining what that tool does?
That is the Wigand Extractor tensioner. And what this does, it's got a tensioning screw. I've got an extractor mounted up in here correctly. And it's got a stop screw. So you determine the distance here. Jack Wigand gives some really good instructions for this with the product. And then you just torque this down until it bottoms out against that stop screw up there, and that gives you a predetermined amount of tension. Then you take it out, put it in the gun, and test it and see if it works better. A lot of people don't realize it, but the extractor is a fitted part, and it's a critical part in the 1911. This can make your gun misfeed if your extractor's not working properly. And it can make it jam, stovepipe, whatever, but it also plays a big role in the feeding, because if your extractor's too tight, it doesn't let the rim come up underneath of its hook properly, and the round just sort of hangs there, especially like if you have a 9mm or something without a huge recoil spring to push it. So tensioning tool, great tool. There's other methods. You can put the extractor backwards in here and give it a bend, you know, put it in the slide. That's the old timers method. You can put it between two surfaces and give it a whack in the middle. You got to have the touch. Yeah. You don't want to whack it too hard.
But this is probably the precise, if you want to be very specific about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. All right, so we're live right now talking 1911 tools. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot them our way. We'd be happy to address them. Just shoot us a question in the comments. For Steve, we're answering questions on 1911 tools, how to use them, anything else 1911 related. So there's one tool there, and I see these two, which basically serve as very similar to the same function, but what are those there?
These are plunger tube stakers. This is the Brownells one here. And what you do, I had a plunger tube right here. Is once you put the plunger tube into the frame, you put the support inside to keep from collapsing it.
Because not all frames usually don't come with this installed if you buy, say, a Caspian or something like that.
Yeah. And then you put this support over it. It's milled out to conform to the plunger tube. And then you use this to apply the pressure. Oops, the handle keeps coming up. And what this does is it stakes the inside of the plunger tube with this little point here. Now, I can't show you the inside of the frame very easily, but the plunger tube itself has these two little fingers, and they're hollow on the end. And this point goes in and flares these out. Now, here's the part you've all been waiting for. How do we get the little crater in here? to do that properly, because you have to have a place for the metal to upset. Otherwise your plunger tube is going to fly out in no time. You got to use a Dremel tool. I'm sorry, there's no way around it. You use a Dremel tool with a 1/8 inch bit. And I'll show you on the outside, but naturally you do this on the inside. All you do is you put this in a vise, you put your frame in a vise, you brace this with 2 hands, and you come down and touch it on that hole, and that'll create a little radius around there. If you're not careful, it's going to grab and skip and go all the way through the frame, but ideally you're controlling it with 2 hands, and you just touch it in there, get a little place, and what that does is it allows those fingers to funnel out. They form a funnel on the top end once this point hits them. And you've got to have some kind of a specialized tool if you want to do this. Otherwise, we sell a Caspian frame with an integral plunger tube, but you definitely need a plunger tube staking tool of some kind to make that work. Gluing them in just doesn't cut it, at least not for long. If you want to try that, you know, a little JB weld or something, you could do it for a while.
Guys actually do that?
Yes,
Right.
I've seen it done.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I noticed we had a few, when we talked triggers, we got a few jigs that the triggers were actually sitting on. What are those used for?
Yeah, this one here is one we've had for a long time. You'll notice it's sloped in the back to accommodate the angle in the back of your trigger here. And this is an alignment type jig where you can straighten out your trigger bow. So say I've got a bent trigger bow right here. It's bent on this right side here. Mm-hmm. What you do is slip this over like this, bring it down as far as you can get it, nice and tight, and then you go ahead and peen it. You don't need to use metal. You can use nylon if you want, or brass, and it'll slowly bend it out. See, I've got a little bit of bow left. Sometimes I just take and do this too. But what this does, if it'll go over this, that means your magazine's going to work properly. It's going to drop out freely. If it's hard to get your trigger bow on this, odds are your magazine might be a little sticky coming out, and that's usually the cause is a bent trigger bow. And these are soft; they bend easily. You might bend one in the package, you know, not even realizing it. Just regular steel. That's all it is.
We got a question here from LS Fukada. Could you explain the importance of mainspring poundage, especially regarding timing of the firing cycle? Does a stiffer mainspring play any part in the feel of the recoil by being harder to push down?
It does. It does. It actually does. And it can be an important part of the recoil cycle. If you're shooting like a 10 millimeter or a 460 Roland, I suggest you put a full power mainspring, if not an extra power mainspring in there, and then go with a small radius firing pin stop that requires more leverage for the slide to cam it open. On the other hand, if you're shooting a 9 millimeter or a wad cutter gun with real light loads, then you want to go with a lighter poundage. You know, it's going to be a range gun, obviously, if you're shooting target loads through it. Go down to 19 or 17 pounds, and that'll help the gun unlock much easier. And you can use a little stiffer recoil spring that way, because sometimes you can go so low on your recoil spring that it won't feed around reliably.
Yeah.
So if you take it somewhere else, if you take it away from the cocking effort on the hammer, then you can put an extra pound or two in your recoil spring and get that first round out again.
Okay, so you got to kind of play with both of them.
Yeah, yeah. If you're balancing a light system like that, like a race gun or a wad cutter gun, something like that, it takes a little bit of doing, but it can be done. It's been done many times before.
All right. Now I see you got some stones there in front of you that we haven't touched on. What do you use those for?
These are just great gunsmithing stones. We've got round, square, triangular, and then a large flat. You can use these on 1911s or on any gun you're working on to smooth edges, smooth surfaces. These aren't specific to the 1911, but they're just a great addition. These are Arkansas stones, so they'll put a really fine edge on something, especially like a sear, or if you want to polish the sides of your hammer and sear to make sure they're dead smooth, not rubbing in the frame.
You'd probably recommend having that just for anything gunsmithing.
Yes, any kind of gun work, you need a set of stones of some kind. I've got all kinds of stones on my bench.
Okay. And then we have some tools up in front of those that look like kind of punches. What are those used for?
This is the mainspring housing pin remover, and all it does is we're unloaded here. As you take that, put it on your bench. Actually, we didn't bring a bench block.
Which is kind of that's a nice tool to have too.
Oh, you've got to have a bench block. Hold on. The blue pistol bench block, you always use that. This has a nice little hole here to drive out your link pin and all kinds of stuff for the 1911. But what I'll do is I'll put this on here, and you just give this a pop. And it not only does it drive your mainspring pin out, but it stays in there and keeps your mainspring housing in place until you want it to drop. So a neat little tool, rounded tip, doesn't mar anything. You'll never know you used a tool on it. You can't see it.
Okay. Now there's a few other cutouts on this block that, are there any other purposes those are for, like this top one? Or?
Most of these are just to drop pins through. You know, I can't remember what that top one's for. Okay. I don't even think it's for a 1911. I think it was for something else, if I remember right.
Okay.
This is a extractor removal tool, actually a slide disassembly tool, because this end is stepped and allows you to push in on your firing pin. And I got a Series 80 here, so I got to push a plunger in at the same time. Then you can bring it down, take out your firing pin stop, just like that, without marring anything up, without anything flying across the room.
Yeah, that's pretty handy.
And then with the other side, now this is something I didn't know about when I first came to work here, but this is for going in here and pushing your extractor claw back into the tunnel so you can push your extractor straight out. Because you know what happens. You try to pry it out here or something, and it catches on that hook every time. You just go in with this tool, pop it free, and push it out. Nice and easy. Just a very simple tool, a double-ended tool with nice knurled handle. Should be on every 1911 gunsmith's bench. Makes the job easy.
Okay. Then we got one more punch there. I assume that's for...
Oh, this is a little beauty here. This is your safety detent depressor. So what that does, say you take out your safety. We'll do this unloaded gun again here. Say you pop out your safety, and you want to put it back in, but your plunger is in the way. And this one's kind of tight. I did fit this one tight. So what you do is you reach in behind here. I hope you can see this. Depress that plunger, and back in place. If you have a frame with the slide off it, you can reach in from the top with something thin, like as long as it's non-marring. This has been polished so it won't take any of your finish off or anything. If you have something small like that, it'll work, but this is really the easy way to do it, and it's a nice little tool. Okay. Marvel Custom makes this again too. Marvel makes some great 1911 tools.
So Sean asks, I want to change my rear sights, or sight, and I would like to know if you recommend the straight 8 rear sights. How do I change the sights?
Sights are a little tough. Normally, the old style method was to put your slide in a vise, a padded but still a solid vise. You'd pad it with something thin like cardboard or something that doesn't compress. Put it in the vise, take a punch and a hammer, knock it out. Otherwise, a better idea is to use a sight pusher that you lock your slide into. This is a one made specifically for the Colt. You can see this traverses, grabs your sight. So when you put your slide in here, let's see if I can get it in here. Like that. You lock it down in place. This is the equivalent of a vise. Then you can push this sight out, put it back in, whatever you want to do. This also has another great function. If you are going to the range, you can take this with you and dial your windage in exactly. No more bang, 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 oh, I went too far with the punch and hammer. This will put it right where you want to go. So these are great tools. They cost a little over $100. They're dedicated to one type of gun. You know, the Colt does the Colts, Beretta does Berettas, Sig does the Sigs, all that, XDs. As far as fitting the sights, though, you want to fit your sights before you put them in because they're going to be too tight. They leave them oversized in case you have a loose dovetail. And if you want to get in the sight business, I recommend you get a safe-sided triangular file that matches the angle of your sight. This one that Brownells makes, this is mine, it's been rusting in my basement, so don't be alarmed. The ones we send you are shiny. But this is the cutting edge, and then these two are smooth. So when it's riding in your dovetail, it's only cutting on that one edge where you want to remove the material. The other edges aren't going to harm it no matter how much you rub. And if you're putting in sights, you ought to be able to put that sight in at least a third of the way, if not half the way by hand, before you start to push it or tap it or whatever. Especially night sights, because night sights don't like to be hit from the side. They can take the back and forth motion of a violent slide racking, no problem. But the side to side, you can crush those little ampules and then all your little gas escapes and they don't glow anymore. So invest in a good file if you want to do sights.
Okay. So that's it for questions, at least for the moment. Let's see, we covered most of these tools here. What do we got going on here? We got some larger items. You mentioned this briefly.
This is to hold your slide. If you want to mill it, you put it in here, lock it down. It's got set screws that go in the back.
So that's not something you're using at home unless you got
no, yeah. But you can cut your top serration. You can angle this a couple different ways. You can cut your clearance on your ejection port if you got an old military type slide. Okay. It's a cool item, very simple, one piece, no moving parts except for the set screws. It's nice.
Yeah. And then this kit here, we got a lot going on there.
Well, this is for the guy that wants to refurbish an old loose 45. These are made in increments. These are precision ground hardened plates made in increments. They go on to this fixture here. And if you are trying to tighten up an old gun, you slide these in here. After you've done your measuring and you know what size your slide needs to be, or what size your slide is and what size your frame needs to be, then you peen these down till these don't want to wiggle anymore. Then you take them out and you can lap the gun back in. You can get a nice tight fit that way.
Okay.
And normally you peen at 4 points, you know, about an inch up here and then about an inch back here, maybe a little less. Leave this middle section alone because it's kind of thin.
So that's the way you go if you don't buy a brand new slide.
Right. You can tighten up an old gun.
Okay.
Yeah. Especially if it's a real good quality components like a Colt or something. Well worth the time and effort. Some of the imported guns are a little on the soft side. You can tighten them up. They'll loosen up after a while, but you can retighten them again.
Okay.
No big deal. Hand me that black handle.
All right.
We had the question about the guy with the 9mm a little while ago.
Mm-hmm.
Might have a locking issue, and I said, you know, it might have burrs. This is made for smoothing up burrs in your locking lug recesses. I should have thought of this earlier. What you do is you wrap your abrasive cloth or your paper around here. This set screw and clamp holds it in place. And this is the exact diameter it needs to be to go in there and smooth those locking lug recesses. Very nice. You can take out any kind of burr, any roughness there, and sometimes that's all it takes. And this is not an expensive tool, but it's made exactly for that one task, and it does it very well. You can also use it to smooth up your bushing entry portion of your slide in case your bushing is a little tight. You know, it goes in there, but you've got to use a wrench to get it out. You might just want to loosen up just a hair. You can either take it off the bushing, you know, shoe shine it with some emery cloth, or you can smooth up here. If you go in there and feel ridges, you know, from the tooling, I'd smooth it up here if possible.
Okay.
Personal preference.
And then Rudy asks, what tools would I need in order to put an ambi safety on my 1911?
You need a pillar file.
Okay.
That's all, because the safety, let me grab a safety here. Whether it's ambidextrous or a single safety, the only thing you're really fitting, see if I can hold my hand still, is this portion right here. That portion is what bears against the back of the sear and keeps it from traveling when you put trigger pressure on it. So right in here, you're going to have to remove material. You need a book or something that shows you where that material comes off, because a lot of safeties are ruined by people just trying it to see what happens.
So typically a safety won't come with instructions?
It will not.
Okay.
Most products don't come with any instructions. You know, barrels, safeties, mag catches, triggers, they don't come with any instructions. They assume you're going to, you know, get a book like this or learn from someone at the time.
Yep.
But fitting a safety is a big deal. The same thing with the grip safety, that's a big deal. It's oversized. The gun's not going to work if you just plug it in and try to go.
There's a grip safety there.
Yeah. What'll happen is you're inside the gun and the grip safety is going to be right there. It's going to have too much material right here to ride down behind there. So it's going to stay up here all the time. You're not going to have a working safety. It'll never come down and block the trigger. So you need to remove a little bit of material here, and it's tough because you can't see well during that job. When I'm fitting a thumb safety, if you imagine there's a sear and hammer and everything in there, that's what I do. I put all that stuff in. Then I get up in there, I look down the pipe, and I can see about where it hits the sear. And I know I'm getting close, or I'm still a long way away and I have to take a lot of material off. But the grip safety is tougher because it's way in there and you can't really see up in where you need to see. So you just got to take a little off and try it, and take a little off and try it. And Jerry Kuhnhausen in this book's got some really great detailed drawings to let you see in your mind what's going on. If you look in this, he's got what do you want to say, not exploded drawings, but kind of cutaway drawings. Cutaway. And it shows you what that relationship is and why you need to take it off at a certain place. So this book helps you see things you can't see in this gun, and it's really an eye-opener.
He's got some great insight in there too on what goes wrong if you don't do it.
He's seen everything there is. He's got some great examples in here of things not to do too. I mean, it's just entertaining for that alone.
Yeah, great resource. Michael asked, is there a checkering kit or something to assist in that process?
Yes, hand me that one. Here's my checkering kit.
It's sitting in front of me the whole time.
This is from Marvel again. I've got more parts on here than are needed. Normally, let me just take this off. This is for the horizontal here, and I don't need those right now. You do the verticals first. And this is all full of dicum and everything else. But you can actually do a good job checkering with this fixture. What you wind up doing is putting your frame in here like this. This frame has no bushing, grip screw bushing, so it's not going to stay where it needs to be. And you take a checkering file. Normally the frame would ride up about here. You take a checkering file and it goes between these two guides here. I hope you can see this. These guides have a little free play in them to where you can tighten them up by just putting a spacer of paper between your file and the side, so the file's free and yet it can't go anywhere really other than straight up, you know, back and forth. And then the magic part is, I'm going to take this frame out before I drop it. The magic part is you can index this over a hole at a time and reposition your file. This will cut either 20 lines per inch or 30 lines per inch when you get the appropriate checkering file. So what you do is you start out at dead center, at least I always start out at dead center, and I cut to depth. In other words, I cut till the file won't cut anymore. Then I move it over a hole, cut that to depth, move it over a hole, cut that to depth. Once you get that done all the way across the front strap, do I have, none of these are checkered, of course. Oh. Again, the old 38 Super. This is one I checkered on this fixture. But once you get them all to depth, you've got a row of straight serrations here. Then you've got to go do the horizontals. And that's done with a different guide. This guide goes up here. You remove the other guide because it's just in your way, just like this one's in the way now. And your file goes in here. Yep, it's got to go down here because those heads overhang. This should be set up from when I used it last. And this allows you to go do the horizontal lines. You probably can't see this very well. And then you advance it. It's got a row of screw holes here. You just keep advancing it back. And like I said, this would not be here to do the horizontals. Then once you get all the horizontal and vertical lines done, you take your single point 60 degree or 90 degree bent needle file and you go over every line repeatedly. You coat it with dicum and just do every line both directions until the dicum's all gone. Then you do it again, then you do it again until they feel pointy, and you'll know when that time comes because they just grab you when you when you wrap your hand around it. It could be a whole segment in itself. Checkering is really slow, tedious, detailed work.
And that's a good jig to do it with.
Yeah.
Are there other options there, or is that the main jig?
There are other options. You know, a lot of guys do it just freehand. If you can just get one line started vertically, you can fake the rest. You can just use it as a guide and roll it around, but you got to have some experience checkering, or at least a lot of filing experience to do that. It's just so easy to jump over and wipe out a row. So I really recommend a guide if you want to get into that checkering game, and it's a lot of fun if you got patience.
Kevin asks, and we're still answering questions here. Just drop it in the comments below. Steve will be happy to answer your question related to 1911 tools. Kevin asks, I'm assembling parts to build what will essentially be an M1911A1 frame using mostly USGI parts on a new Rock Island frame. I've heard many stories about the loose tolerances on USGI 1911s. Should I expect the same amount of fitting to be required as with other 1911s?
It depends. When your parts were new for the 1911A1 for the U.S. military, they were tight. They did require fitting. But once they get handed down through generations, sometimes they're tight, sometimes they aren't. And it depends on your frame too. Your frame may bring your hammer and sear closer together, or your sear and your safety closer together. You might get lucky and drop in your thumb safety and it works just like it is. But I would always expect some fitting involved. There's just no getting around it on a 1911. Yeah. Very seldom can you drop every part in that gun and have it work. And you have a new frame, so you know there's going to be some fitting involved, I'm sure.
So for those that maybe didn't join us at the beginning, what are the essential tools that someone should have if they plan on, one, taking an old gun like that and getting it tightened up or installing parts on it, or they're taking a Caspian frame and slide and assembling a new gun from there? What are the tools they need?
Shop manual, number one, far and away. A good measuring tool of some kind. I use an electronic dial caliper, but standard one works well. Always worked for me in the machine shop. Pillar file. You'd be surprised how much you use this when you're building a 1911.
So if they go to our site and just search pillar file, they'll be able to find it.
Okay. Pillar.
Okay.
A hammer, vise. Vise is critical. Mm-hmm. This vise we've got here, this multi-vise, will work fine. It's heavy enough to do 1911 work. You wouldn't want to do any, crucial blacksmithing on it. You couldn't make horseshoes on it or anything, but it'll handle anything you do with a 1911. Yeah. Other than that, a lot of this stuff is optional. It really is.
It just makes it
easier and more precise. Okay. Some people can do the precision by hand. Some people need a little help with it.
Mm-hmm. And for specialty operations, say like the plunger tube installation, that's going to be pretty tough.
That's a problem without the tool.
Yeah.
I recommend a plunger tube installation tool, or just buy a frame with a plunger tube in it.
Okay. Any other tips and tricks you had in mind?
Yeah. Buy the little magnetip attachment that does the barrel bushing or the grip screw bushings. You can put them in and out without damaging them this way. These fit.
Is that a common problem you see people doing?
Yes,
is damaging
these get chewed up from screwdrivers all the time. What this does, it surrounds the bushing, centers the bit. The bit's the exact size. You can feel it click into place. So you can really tighten down on these or really get a stuck one out with the proper bit without doing any damage to it, because it supports this. A lot of times people put a regular screwdriver on it and the corners mash out just from the pressure. Whereas this tool surrounds it and contains that, so they have to stay where they're at no matter how much pressure you put on there.
Okay.
And who knows, you get a used gun, maybe somebody Loctited the bushings in place or something. You don't know what's going to happen. And a lot of times we're switching out bushings not because they're bad, but because we want to go to slim grips or something that require thinner bushings. Mm-hmm. So it's not always a choice. Sometimes they just have to come out.
Okay. We do have another question here. Kim asks, for a 38 Super shooting 125 jacketed hollow points, what is the best twist for the barrel for a race gun like John Bianchi?
For the lighter bullets, you can go with the slower twist rate. The standard twist rate works fine. That's what I've got in my 38 Super here. It's just a standard 1 in 16 or 1 in 18. Now I can't remember, but this is a Schumann barrel. And It's only when you go to the heavier bullets that you really run into problems with stabilization. Pretty much those light bullets, you know, the 38 Super was designed around the 130 grain ammo, so any barrel, any 38 Super barrel you pick is going to have a good twist for it, whether it's just right or a little fast, which doesn't hurt a thing. So I wouldn't worry about it.
Okay. Christian asks, do you use a jig to hold the sear when doing a trigger job, or do you do it freehand? I guess you specifically.
Always use a sear. Yep. Okay. I've used the Power Custom here. I've used this for years. Very easy. The only reason I use this particular one, though, is because I have other guns I work on. You know, Browning high powers, Ruger Mark 1, 2, 3, and 4. Even 1022s and stuff. You get the adapter plates, you can do all those with this because it's a universal type jig.
So if you don't use a jig, what do you run the risk of?
You're never gonna get it perfectly even, and you're gonna round that edge so you won't get good contact. Who is it? Harrison Design has a new Sear Jig, which we were going to carry. I don't know if we do the True Radius Sear Jig, which rounds the radius exactly. Where's my sear? Yeah. It rounds the radius around this center point here where the actual sear pivots. So it would be perfectly in line with that as far as the radius goes. And it's supposed to give you a much smoother let off, let you take the gun down safely a little easier. I haven't tried it yet. I'd like to.
Okay.
I'd really like to.
All right. So basically, if you're going to be installing a sear and fitting it, you probably want that, unless you buy, say, the drop-in kits that we sell quite a few of.
The drop-in kits, I use the cylinder and slide kits, and they're great. They deliver exactly what they say. Otherwise, just get one of these. You know, one of the little sear jigs that you use with a stone and a shim. They'll do just as good a job. You just, if you're not going to run production and have to do 20 of them a day, no problem.
Okay. Alex asks, what pound recoil spring for a 10mm Commander?
Oh boy, 26 probably. Yeah. It'll be way up there. Look into getting a firing pin stop that is square down here rather than this big radius. That lowers this pivot point so the hammer is harder to cock for the slide coming back. Then up your mainspring a little bit. Use at least a 23-pound mainspring, if not an extra power one. And look forward to either a 24 or 26-pound spring. You're going to need it. There's just not enough slide weight there to slow it down without a whole lot of spring.
So those firing pin stops, what are they called typically? What do you
square bottom firing pin stop. Okay. I think we get one from EGW, for example.
All right.
It's great.
So that's great for higher power.
Oh yeah, it slows that slide down. Tremendous. Right. Well, it increases your dwell time. Yeah. It just slows it down at that initial critical when the pressure's the highest. Yeah. And that's when all the bad things happen.
One of those minor things that's not really apparent.
It's huge because of that leverage. It's just in the right place.
Okay. Michael asks, how do you feel about Nallen drop-in trigger kits instead of doing a trigger job on the factory sear and hammer? Which one is better?
I do like those kits. I've used the Nallen kits as well. Nallen cylinder and slide I found to be very consistent over the years. They deliver the poundage they say they will. They have some really neat, really low poundage kits also. I tend to go for the 4 to 4.5 pounders on my guns. My fingers aren't that sensitive. I don't practice enough. But if you're going to build a race gun or something and you want to try that 3.5 pound kit, it's an easy way to do it, because it will do it, and if it doesn't, we'll take it back. It's guaranteed.
So you could potentially get the same results by doing your own trigger job.
Yeah.
But it's going to be, it's going to be consistent though, buying.
You have to tool up. You'll have to tool up to get a trigger job like that though. Anytime you drop below 5 pounds, it's pretty tough to do it by hand.
Oh really? Okay.
Yeah. If you got a jig, you can. Even that simple jig, that Ed Brown jig, you can work until you get a 3.5 pound trigger.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good way to do that then. All right. Any other tips you've picked up along the way, or anything we maybe glossed over?
Well, for some of you that joined late, like I said earlier, if you want to pick up a cheap, like an imported 1911 or one of the Remingtons or something like that, and just start replacing one piece at a time to kind of get your skills sort of lined up and sorted out, that's a great way to start gunsmithing a 1911. Get a working gun, replace a part, see if it still works. Keep at it till it does work, then try another part. Do a trigger job, replace a safety, put a new barrel in, whatever. That is a great way to get into 1911 gunsmithing if you've never done any of this. If you're primarily a rifle smith or something, this isn't that bad. It's just a lot of attention to detail and close tolerances.
Okay, so a good way to start out then. Maybe just don't go head first into a complete
The complete
project.
build is really tough. The only way I would recommend doing a complete build if you've never worked on guns or at least fitted, parts to guns, would be to take a class where you supply the components, you come in and have an expert lead you through it. I went to a class last summer. Mike Watkins was teaching it. I'd never taken his class, so I thought I'd go and see what I picked up, and I picked up quite a bit. But he has people at the end of the week, they start on a Monday, and then by Friday they're shooting their guns. And they've started with basic components, oversized. They fitted the frame to the slide, they fitted the barrel, they've done all the internals, and by the end of the week you have a working gun.
That's probably different skill ranges everywhere from novices to
complete novices in there, complete in a lot of cases, and they were able to do it.
Neat. All right. Well, thank you, Steve. I learned a bit
Glad to
today.
do it.
I hope everyone else did as well. Hopefully we were able to answer your questions. If you still have more questions, feel free to shoot us a question in the comments or give us a call. Give us a call on the tech line. It's a free service we have. Our gun techs like Steve would be happy to speak with you, answer any questions you have along your journey in assembling or building a 1911. Check out our YouTube channel. It's a great resource. We got a lot of videos from Steve himself. But tips, tricks with the 1911, we have a tab specifically for the 1911, so you don't have to search around. We've got a section there just for 1911s. So again, give us a call if you want. Shoot us a question in the comments. We'd be happy to help. And we'll see you again next time. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks for watching.